Imagine your power's been out for 3 days in the dead of winter. No electricity, no furnace, but your home is still warm. How? The same way families survived the 1940s when bombings knocked out power lines and fuel was rationed to the ounce. This forgotten heating system uses nothing but water, gravity, and basic physics, and it still works today. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how the gravity-fed radiator loop works, why wartime families trusted it with their lives, and how you can build one in your own home for emergency backup or off-grid living. By the end, you'll understand a heating method so reliable, some families kept using it decades after the war ended, simply because it never failed them. Welcome to Pantry, where we uncover forgotten survival skills and practical solutions for modern resilience. If you're serious about self-sufficiency and emergency preparedness, hit that like button and subscribe, because the knowledge we're reviving here could make all the difference when you need it most. Let's travel back to the 1940s. Picture a typical winter evening. Families huddled in their homes, listening to air raid sirens in the distance. The power flickers, then dies completely. In some cities, bombing raids took out electrical infrastructure. In rural areas, winter storms snapped power lines like twigs. And when the power went out, so did the heat. But this wasn't just about discomfort. This was about survival. Coal deliveries had stopped. Oil was rationed down to the ounce. Every bit of fuel had to be stretched as far as humanly possible. Families couldn't simply call for help or wait for utility companies to restore service. Infrastructure was overwhelmed, resources were scarce, people were on their own. In this environment of absolute necessity, civilians didn't invent something new. Instead, they reached back centuries to revive a heating method that required nothing modern society could take away. No electricity, no complex machinery, just water, pipes, and the unchanging laws of physics. This was the gravity-fed radiator loop, and for countless households, it became the only thing standing between them and frozen pipes, ice-cold bedrooms, and potentially deadly exposure. What made this system so special wasn't advanced technology or expensive materials. It was the opposite. The gravity-fed radiator loop worked precisely because it was simple. There were no motors to burn out, no circuit boards to fail, no fuel pumps to seize up. Once you got it running, it just kept going. Hot water rose, cold water sank, and the loop continued circulating as long as you kept the stove burning. The psychological impact of this reliability cannot be overstated. When everything around you is uncertain, when you don't know if tomorrow will bring more bombs or another blizzard or yet another shortage, having one thing you can absolutely count on becomes invaluable. Families who installed these systems during the war years often refused to disconnect them afterward. Even when power returned and modern furnaces came back online, they kept their gravity-fed loops as backup. They'd seen what happened when complex systems failed, and they weren't willing to depend entirely on them ever again. So how does this system actually work? Let's break down the physics that powers it, because once you understand the principle, you'll realize just how elegant this solution really is. The entire system operates on a phenomenon called Thermosiphon Circulation. It's based on a simple fact. Hot water is lighter than cold water. When water heats up, its molecules spread out, making it less dense. This lighter, hot water naturally wants to rise. Meanwhile, cooler, denser water sinks. If you arrange your pipes correctly, this temperature difference creates a continuous circulation loop without any pumps or motors whatsoever. Here's the critical part. The heat source must be positioned lower than the radiators it feeds. This vertical difference is absolutely essential. Without it, the system won't work. Think of it like a siphon, but one powered by temperature instead of suction. Let me walk you through the complete cycle. Your heat source, let's say a wood stove with a water jacket, sits in your basement or on your ground floor. As the fire burns, it heats water in that jacket. The hot water becomes lighter and wants to rise. From the stove, a pipe leads upward, climbing continuously toward the radiator on the floor above. This is crucial. The pipe must slope steadily upward without any dips or valleys. Any low point can trap air bubbles, and those bubbles will stall your circulation. The hot water reaches the radiator and flows through it. As it moves through the radiator's metal fins, heat transfers to the surrounding air, warming the room. But here's the clever part. As the water releases its heat, it cools down. Cooler water is denser, heavier. It wants to sink. So from the bottom of the radiator, another pipe carries this cooled water back down toward the stove, sloping continuously downward. The cooled water returns to the heat source, gets reheated, and the cycle begins again.
As long as there's a temperature difference between your heat source and your radiators, this loop keeps moving. Quietly. Efficiently. Endlessly. But there's one more critical component. The system must remain open. You need either a vent or a small header tank, usually positioned in the attic or at the highest point of your system. This prevents dangerous pressure buildup. Water expands when it heats up, and if you seal the system completely, that expansion has nowhere to go. Pressure builds until something ruptures. The header tank or vent gives that expanding water a safe place to go, keeping everything running smoothly and safely. Now let's talk about the actual components wartime families used. Remember, these were desperate times. You couldn't just order parts online or run to the hardware store. People scavenged materials from wherever they could find them. Copper pipes pulled from demolished buildings, iron radiators salvaged from older homes, leftover plumbing from central heating systems that no longer worked without electricity. The heat source was typically a wood or coal stove modified with a water jacket. If you're not familiar with the term, a water jacket is essentially a chamber that surrounds the firebox. As the fire burns, it heats the water in this chamber. Some stoves came with built-in water jackets. Others were retrofitted by skilled metalworkers who welded or bolted on custom jackets. Radiators were placed strategically in the rooms where warmth mattered most. Bedrooms, obviously. Workspaces where people spent their days. Often families couldn't heat their entire home, so they focused on creating what they called hot zones, 1 or 2 rooms with a dedicated radiator loop while the rest of the house stayed cold. Insulation was another key factor. Every foot of exposed pipe that wasn't insulated was bleeding heat into spaces where it wasn't needed. Wartime repair manuals emphasized wrapping water lines with whatever insulation materials were available: cloth, newspaper, even straw packed around the pipes. This wasn't just about comfort. Proper insulation made the difference between a system that could run all night on one load of wood versus one that required constant stoking. The positioning of radiators also followed strategic principles. Placing them under windows might seem counterintuitive. Why put your heat source right next to the coldest part of the room? But there's wisdom in it. The warm air rising from the radiator meets the cold air seeping in from the window, creating a thermal barrier. This prevents drafts from penetrating deeper into the room and actually makes the space feel warmer overall. Families adapted other clever tricks to maximize efficiency. Thicker radiators with more fins provided greater surface area for heat transfer. Curtains hung around beds trapped warmth, creating warm cocoons for sleeping. Doors to unused rooms stayed closed, concentrating heat where people actually spent their time. What's remarkable is how long many of these systems lasted. Decades in some cases. Because there were so few moving parts and the construction was so straightforward, there was simply less that could go wrong. A properly installed gravity-fed radiator loop could run for 20, 30, even 40 years with nothing more than occasional leak repairs and routine maintenance. Now let's bring this into the present day, because the principles that kept families warm in the 1940s haven't changed. Physics is physics, whether we're talking 1943 or 2025. The question is, how do you adapt this system for a modern home? The fundamental rules remain exactly the same. Your heat source must be lower than your radiators. Your pipes must maintain proper slopes. continuously upward from the heat source to the radiator, continuously downward for the return line. Your system must remain open with proper venting, and you must insulate your water lines to prevent heat loss. Let's walk through a practical example. Imagine you have a basement wood stove. You want to feed radiators on the first and second floors above. You install a water jacket on your stove or purchase a stove that already has one built in. From the top of that water jacket, a copper pipe rises through your basement ceiling into your first floor living space. It climbs steadily upward, no dips, no valleys, until it reaches your first radiator. That hot water flows through that radiator, warming your living room. From the bottom of that radiator, another pipe continues upward to a second radiator on your second floor. After passing through that second radiator, the now cooled water flows down through a return pipe, sloping continuously downward until it reconnects with the inlet on your stove's water jacket. At the highest point of your system, probably in your attic, you have a small header tank, maybe just a 5-gallon bucket with a lid, that allows for water expansion and prevents pressure buildup. Fire up your stove, and within 15 to 20 minutes, you'll start feeling warmth radiating from those radiators. The system is completely silent.
There's no hum of a furnace, no whoosh of forced air, no clicking of thermostats, just steady, gentle warmth spreading through your home. This gentle warmth is actually one of the system's characteristics. Unlike forced air systems that blast hot air and then shut off, creating temperature swings, a gravity-fed radiator loop provides consistent, even heat. The radiators stay warm as long as the fire burns, creating a comfortable, stable temperature without the dry air that forced air systems produce. Consider an off-grid cabin scenario. A winter storm knocks out power for 5 days. If you're relying entirely on electric heat or a furnace that needs electricity to run its blower and controls, you're in trouble. But if you have a gravity-fed radiator loop connected to a wood stove, you're completely unaffected. You split wood, load the stove, and your home stays warm. You're not hoping the power comes back soon. You're not worried about frozen pipes. You're self-sufficient. Or think about a home with solar power. Solar is fantastic, but winter days are short and often cloudy. Your battery reserves might get low right when you need heat most. Having a gravity-fed loop as backup means you're not forced to choose between heating your home and preserving battery power for other essential systems. You can run your wood stove loop, keep the house warm, and save your solar power for lights, refrigeration, and other electricity-dependent needs. The concept of hot zones that wartime families pioneered is just as relevant today. You don't necessarily need to heat your entire 3,000 square foot house during an extended outage. Instead, you create a heated zone, maybe your kitchen, living room, and 1 or 2 bedrooms, fed by a single radiator loop. This dramatically reduces your fuel consumption. 1 cord of wood that might last you 2 weeks if you're heating your whole house could stretch to 6 weeks if you're only heating your core living spaces. Modern materials make building these systems even easier than it was in the 1940s. Copper piping is readily available. Cast iron radiators can be found at architectural salvage yards, often for very reasonable prices. Modern water jackets designed specifically for wood stoves can be purchased online. You can even find detailed instructions and diagrams from contemporary homesteaders and off-grid enthusiasts who've built their own systems. Let's talk about sourcing materials. Start with the radiators. Check architectural salvage yards, Habitat for Humanity restores, or online marketplaces. Old cast iron radiators are heavy and cumbersome, which means people are often happy to get rid of them cheaply. Make sure they're not leaking and that all the connections are intact. A little rust on the outside is fine, that can be cleaned up, but you want the interior passages to be clear. For piping, copper is your best bet. It conducts heat well, it's durable, and it's relatively easy to work with. You'll need various fittings, elbows, T's, unions, to route your pipes properly. This is where it helps to sketch out your system first. Measure the distances, figure out your slopes, and make a shopping list before you head to the hardware store. The heat source requires more thought. If you're installing a new wood stove specifically for this purpose, look for models that either come with built-in water jackets or are designed to accept them. If you already have a wood stove and want to retrofit it, you'll need to either fabricate a custom water jacket or hire someone with metalworking skills to do it for you. This isn't a DIY job unless you're experienced with welding and understand the safety requirements. Safety absolutely cannot be overlooked. The open loop design with a header tank or vent is non-negotiable. Do not seal this system. Water expands significantly when heated, and a sealed system will build pressure until something fails. Either a joint ruptures or, in the worst case, the water jacket itself gives way. That's dangerous, not just because of the leak, but because you're dealing with water heated to near boiling temperatures. Regular monitoring is essential, especially in the first weeks of operation. Check all joints and connections for leaks. Make sure your header tank is functioning properly and that water level stays consistent. Watch for air bubbles in your radiators, which can indicate that air is getting trapped somewhere in your system. If you notice reduced flow or cold spots, you may need to bleed the air out of your radiators or adjust your pipe slopes. Maintenance over the long term is remarkably minimal. Inspect your connections periodically for leaks. Check your water level in the header tank and top it off as needed. Some water will naturally evaporate over time. Flush your system every few years to remove any sediment buildup. That's really about it. No motors to service, no filters to replace, no complex diagnostics to run. The durability of these systems is one of their greatest advantages. We're talking about technology that can operate for decades with minimal intervention. Compare that to a modern furnace, which typically needs professional service every year, has a lifespan of 15 to 20 years, and depends on a complex web of electrical components, sensors, and moving parts. The gravity-fed radiator loop is the epitome of appropriate technology. Sophisticated enough to be effective, simple enough to be reliable. This type of knowledge is exactly what preparedness is really about. It's not about hoarding supplies or living in fear. It's about understanding systems and principles that work regardless of what's happening in the wider world. When you know how to harness gravity and thermosiphon circulation to heat your home, you're not dependent on the grid staying up, on fuel deliveries arriving on schedule, or on having enough money to pay increasingly expensive heating bills. You've got options. You've got resilience. And that's what the families of the 1940s understood. They didn't build these systems because they were romantic about the past or interested in living primitively. They built them because they worked. Because when everything else failed, the gravity-fed radiator loop just kept circulating, kept warming, kept protecting their homes and their families. That same principle applies today. We live in a world where extreme weather events are becoming more common. Power grids face increasing strain. Supply chains prove vulnerable to disruption. Having a heating method that operates independently of all those external factors isn't paranoid. It's prudent. Whether you're a homesteader pursuing self-sufficiency, a prepper focused on emergency readiness, or simply someone who likes to understand how things work and wants backup options, the gravity-fed radiator loop deserves your attention. It's a proven technology that survived the ultimate stress test, keeping people alive during wartime winters when failure meant freezing. As you consider your own preparedness plans, think about heating. It's often overlooked in favor of more obvious concerns like food storage and water filtration, but heat is absolutely critical in cold climates. You can survive weeks without food, days without water, but in sub-zero temperatures, hypothermia can kill you in hours. By learning and applying these principles, thermosiphon circulation, proper pipe slopes, and open-loop design, you're not just installing a backup heating system. You're connecting with a tradition of practical knowledge that stretches back centuries. You're ensuring that these skills don't disappear into history, and you're building real, tangible resilience into your home. The families who relied on gravity-fed radiator loops in the 1940s would recognize the system you'd build today. The stove might be more efficient, the materials slightly different, but the fundamental principle remains unchanged. Hot water rises, cold water sinks. Arrange your pipes correctly, and that simple fact of physics will keep your home warm through the worst that winter can throw at you. That's the beauty of low-tech solutions. They don't become obsolete. They don't require updates or patches. They just work, the same way they've always worked, because they're built on unchanging physical laws rather than complex technology that depends on a fragile support infrastructure. So if this interests you, start researching.
Look up thermosiphon heating systems, visit salvage yards and see what radiators are available in your area. Sketch out how a system might work in your particular home. Talk to older relatives who might remember these systems from their childhood. Join online communities of homesteaders and off-grid enthusiasts who can share their experiences and advice. The knowledge is out there, waiting to be rediscovered. And who knows, the next time the power goes out for days and your neighbors are huddling under blankets, you might be sitting comfortably in your warm home, watching the gentle circulation of your gravity-fed radiator loop doing exactly what it was designed to do over 80 years ago, keeping you safe, keeping you warm, and proving that sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. If you found this deep dive into forgotten technology valuable, make sure you're subscribed to Prep Pantry. We're dedicated to uncovering practical skills and resilient solutions that actually work when you need them most. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts on gravity-fed heating systems, and check out our other videos on emergency preparedness and self-sufficient living. Until next time, stay warm, stay prepared, and remember, the best backup plan is the one that doesn't need backup.